When Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went to the region of Judea, beyond the Jordan. Large crowds followed him, and he cured them there. Some Pharisees came to him, and to test him they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause?" He answered, "Have you not read that the one who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh'? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no one separate." They said to him, "Why then did Moses command us to give a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her?" He said to them, "It was because you were so hard-hearted that Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. And he who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." The disciples said to him, "If such is the case of a man with his wife, is it better not to marry?" But he said to them, "Not everyone can accept this teaching, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. And there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can."
We love our picture wall. Memories of what it means for us to be family, and there are some great moments contained within it, as well as some dodgy haircuts, although not mine, obviously. While these pictures are great though, whilst we often think about which ones are our favourites as we sit round the dinner table, they could never tell the whole story. There have been loads of good times, but there have been some difficult ones too. Being married to me means Natasha has had to put up with quite a lot. Having 3 children, an increasing level of hormones in the house means things aren't always easy, and they're definitely not quiet. We've had to work at things. And to be honest, we still have to work at things. Because family life, or relationships of any sort, well, they demand that if we want them to be good and healthy. At the start of this chapter, we find a whole bunch of verses devoted to a new understanding of family, where Jesus takes the opportunity to cover subjects such as divorce, remarriage, celibacy, children, young people. Not coming from a world perspective, but coming from a Jesus perspective that champions the importance of the family unit. Notably, especially in a series entitled Journey to Jerusalem, this passage starts with Jesus back on familiar ground. When Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. Jesus hasn't been here since he was tempted by the devil. And surprise, surprise, on his return, he's being tested again. This time by the Pharisees, although in Matthew's theology, well, there wasn't a lot of difference between the two. Let's dive in and start with the Pharisees' first question. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause? Now, why on earth would they ask Jesus this? Well, straight away we can see a link to John the Baptist, executed in part because he vehemently objected to Herod's divorce and subsequent remarriage to a divorcee. It's no coincidence that the Pharisees' question has all the same vocabulary and tones as those events, reminding the reader not only how the religious leaders viewed Jesus, but that Jesus' journey will end up in the same place as John's. Jesus begins his reply with a quotation from the ancient scriptures and the story of creation. "Have you not read that the one who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. It's the type of language that we can only assume inspired a Spice Girls song some 2,000 years later, two become one. But immediately we're introduced to something that didn't appear when Jesus spoke about divorce in the Sermon on the Mount. Then he spoke about just that, about divorce. But now he's talking about marriage, rooting it in the example of the first human pair who were intended solely for one another. Marriage in its original sense, two people making a covenant or a promise before God to work at things, to be wholly committed to one another. In technical terms, monogamous. An important moment because the Old Testament included a whole heap of polygamous relationships where predominantly men had many wives. Whatever legal definitions may have been added in countries or cultures across the world, here, through Jesus' words, we get a picture of how God meant it to be. The Pharisees haven't finished though. Why then did Moses command us to give a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her? Wow. Spot the men in a patriarchal, male-dominated society talking. And Jesus' response is a pretty clear one. It was because you were so hard-hearted that Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. And he who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Jesus is not letting the Pharisees, or any men in fact, off the hook. With marriage comes responsibility, one that many men in the ancient Middle East just didn't live up to. A promise is a promise, and to neglect that for any reason other than sexual immorality, Jesus is saying, is a breaking of a covenant, a breaking of a promise. These are challenging words, and we'll return to them in a moment. However, it should also reassure us that when God makes a promise, he means it. The disciples then respond with a display of incredible humanity. If such is the case of a man with his wife, is it better not to marry? Or in layman's terms, this all sounds a bit heavy. It might be better not to bother getting married in the first place. As always, there is a grace to Jesus' response. Paraphrasing, he tells his disciples, that's absolutely some people's response. To remain single or celibate. Some choose it from birth, others do it as a result of teaching they hear, and others still make a conscious choice to devote their whole lives to God or to Christian work. For those who choose that, though, Jesus says it should be regarded as a gift from God. But what do we do with all of this? There's so much going on in these verses. What do we take from it? I'd suggest three things. Firstly, for those of you who journeyed with us through this account of Jesus' ministry, it shouldn't really be a surprise that Matthew's got us focused on right relationship with God and right relationship with one another. That, after all, is what it means to be righteous, one of Jesus' key messages, and something at the heart of what it means to be a follower, because healthy relationships in all of their forms and rooted in a healthy relationship with God make for healthy lives. Secondly, in the context of relationships, marriage is a good thing. Intimate relationship protected by a covenant promise made in the presence of God. If two people are committed to one another, why wouldn't they want that? A unit that works hard, gives and takes to stay together, in fact fights for it at all costs. As I said earlier, this was clearly something for ancient Middle Eastern men to learn in this. And there's definitely something for us in modern society to learn too. Third and finally, divorce should be a last resort. not seen as an easy way out. Now, that's not an easy thing to say in today's broken society where it's become so normal. And of course, there are all sorts of reasons that it happens, some of which are very legitimate. The challenge, though, whenever we explore a subject like this, is that we're seeking a biblical truth. But we have to hold that in tension with the fact that there are real people in messy situations, some of whom we know, trying to work it all out. So perhaps take this from it. Healthy relationships are at the heart of who God is. That's what He wants for us in all aspects of our lives, because He wants every one of us to experience a loving, safe relationship within which to thrive. Marriage and the family unit is at the heart of that. And He sets the example with His promises to us. He will never leave us nor forsake us. What a beautiful thing for us to aspire to in our relationships. The broken realities of our world, however, mean it doesn't always work like that. If your marriage, past or present, has failed, whether we've messed up or somebody else has, if it has simply happened and is beyond mending, God's message is one of forgiveness, of grace, and of restoration. And the response of the church must surely be one of understanding and of love. Because after all, isn't that what it means to be family?